Hello and welcome to Stranded Deep. My name is Agork. Today we're going to be looking at navigation in Stranded Deep. Now, navigation, yeah, we've all tried it. We've all gotten lost. Come on, you know you have. Don't deny it. So why does this happen? Well, there are a lot of small environmental things in this game that are messing with our minds and that can cause us to sail off course. There are also a lot of times where we're simply not paying enough attention to what we're doing, where we're going, and to what's going on around us. However, some of the biggest reasons that we get lost are simply due to the design of the game itself. Now, many of you may be aware of some of these issues, but there is one big reason that I'm pretty sure that nobody knows about, not even the developers. And I only discovered this while researching and testing everything in-game for this video. I was struggling with all the data that I was collecting because, well, some of it just didn't make sense. So though I think many of us have suspected that there had to be something fundamentally wrong with the game, we didn't really know what the problem was. Well, I think I finally figured it out. I'll reveal this and go over some of the bigger issues a little later in this video. We'll also look at some tools, tricks, and techniques that we can use to help us navigate around in Stranded Deep, and I'll even show you how to find compass directions even when you don't have a compass. But first, let's start with some of the simpler problems. Now, of course, the first problem is that there's no in-game map where we can keep track of our location as we're sailing around in the game. We have to do this in our heads. Due to how the islands are arranged in the world, it's very easy to get confused and to accidentally go to the wrong island. When you look around, there are islands equally spaced all around the horizon. Some are closer and some appear to be further away. However, as you move your view side to side, the islands on the horizon change size and clarity. And it can be confusing as to which ones are actually closer and which are further away. When sailing to one of the islands, especially those that are further away, we may change our minds in the middle of a journey and decide to head to one of the other islands that looks closer. This change of course midway to where you're going, that can cause you to lose track of what direction you have to go to get back to where you came from. Another problem, of course, is not using a compass at all times. Most of us try to remember to use the compass, but at times we forget, or we've left it behind by accident, or we've put it in a crate and don't know which crate it's in and can't be bothered to look for it. If you don't use a compass consistently and always take a bearing on where you're going when traveling between islands, you can end up losing track of where you've been or how to get back to where you started. And even if you do use the compass, that's still no guarantee, as you can still get easily confused. Maybe you take a bearing, put the compass away, and then pull your raft out into the water, and then maybe you have to avoid a poisonous starfish, or you have to fight with the currents, or try and get around a wreck. And by the time you get your raft into position and you're ready to sail and go on your way, you look up and suddenly, all the islands look the same, and you're not really sure which one it was you were supposed to go to. So maybe you just guess, and maybe you've guessed wrong. Using a compass incorrectly can also cause you to go off course. I've seen people point the actual blue compass at where they want to go, and they read the direction by pointing the needle at it. But doing it that way will put you off by about 20 degrees or so on the compass. And that's enough to, again, confuse the matter as to which island it is that you're going to. The correct way to measure a direction with the compass is to use the little white dot on the center of your screen and point it at, or place it over, the spot that you want to measure. And then you just read the resulting direction by looking at where the needle on the compass is pointing. So that's fairly simple. Even if you use the compass, there are still other factors that can cause you to go off course. Ocean waves, ocean currents. Both of these can alter your course while you're sailing from one island to another. And if you're not paying close enough attention, this can cause you to go to a different island than the one that you were aiming for. Smaller rafts are more susceptible to being knocked off course by a wave, so you have to be especially aware of that when sailing on a small raft. And that's probably usually early in the game. Getting distracted on your way to an island can also cause you to lose track of which island you were heading to. Maybe you drift or get turned a little bit by a wave while you're stopped and you're watching a whale. Or perhaps a shark is chasing you and you're busy looking behind you, keeping an eye on the shark, and this can perhaps make you unaware of the fact that the ocean currents are pushing you in one direction or that a wave has just turned your raft. Another issue that can cause many of us to go in the wrong direction is that we may subconsciously be making directional decisions based on certain things that we know of as being true in our real life, such as the direction of sunrise, sunset, or even the midday sun. For example, we all know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. We also know generally what direction the sun will be in the middle of the day. We all navigate this way subconsciously in our daily lives all the time. But is the sun actually in these directions in Stranded Deep? I'll answer that for you. For some of us, the answer is no, it's not. These are things that we can actually test though. So I went into the game and I tested the direction of the sunrise, the sunset, and the midday sun. And this may surprise you a little bit. Sunrise is not so bad. It's the best of the three, in my opinion. The sun comes up somewhere between southeast and east. So if we think the sun normally rises in the east, that's not bad. That's not far off. All you have to remember is that the island to the left of the sunrise will be due east. If you can remember that, you should be good to go. Sunset, the sun sets somewhere between northwest and north. Northwest and north. I mean, that's way off. Like, if you ever have sailed into the sunset in this game thinking you were going west, you're not. You've been going almost north. So that'll definitely point you at a wrong island and can completely screw you over and have you going in the wrong direction. Now, the midday sun, this is an interesting one. And this one, I kind of suspected there was something wrong here for a while and never really clued in why or what the problem was until I started doing this video. And I looked into it and then it's like, oh, crap. All right. I'm from Canada. So I'm from the Northern Hemisphere. Well, like many players in the game, Canadians, Americans, Europeans, Japanese, whatever, anyone who lives in the Northern Hemisphere. We're used to the sun being to the south in the middle of the day. It's just ingrained into our brains. That's what we've had our entire lives. I think many of us have never even considered the fact that the sun could be anywhere else other than south in the middle of the day. But in Stranded Deep, it's north. It's the complete opposite. And there's some of you going, what? How could that be? That's not right. And there's others going, yeah, well, of course. Okay, so if we just quickly go back to geography class, this is a map of the Pacific Ocean. The solid line in the center is the equator. The two dotted lines are the Tropic of Cancer in the north and the Tropic of Capricorn in the south. Those are the lines that indicate the furthest north and the furthest south that the sun will be directly overhead, depending on the time of the year. These two lines are 23.5 degrees above and below the equator, and that is due to the 23.5 degrees tilt of the planet. So basically, the sun will always be between those two dotted lines somewhere, depending on the time of year. In Canada, the continental United States, and Europe, the sun is always going to be to the south in the middle of the day. And in New Zealand, the sun is always going to be to the north in the middle of the day. It makes no difference what season it is, it's just geography. Simple. Okay, so if you're paying attention here, you may realize that this could affect where the sun would be in our game. And yes, it would, if the developers actually had the sun programmed in to follow the seasonal path of the sun, but they haven't. I have restarted the game numerous times, trying every single month in the game, and the position of the sun does not change. It's always rising in the same direction, it's always the same direction in the middle of the day, and it's always setting in the same direction. So there is only one set of data in-game. And this is important to realize because this is going to affect how we can navigate in the game. And we'll get to that in a little while. But first, let's try and understand the world that we're playing in a little better. The best tool that we can use for that is the Cartographer. This is Stranded Deep's in-game map of a sort. You can't access this while playing the game, and you have to open it from the main menu. The Cartographer was added to the game so that we could create and add custom islands to the game. It extends the playability of the game, so that's great. However, we can also use it to get a better understanding of the layout of the in-game world. So once we open the Cartographer, we can see that our world is a 5x5 grid. There are islands on each of the grid squares except for the 3 squares where there are red skulls. Those are the 3 boss fights. You start the game in the center of the map where there is a small island. You spawn into the game in your life raft just off of this island. You paddle ashore, you set up your first base, and then you explore outwards from there. The square with the red background is your current island, and where you last saved the game. This is also the island that you will be on when you start up the game again. You can sail beyond the map area, but beyond that it's just open ocean. If you sail to an island and you can see islands all around you, but you don't see any islands off to one side, that means you're on the edge of the map. Where the boss fights are, there is no island, so if you see islands all around you, except for one location where there should be an island but there isn't, that would be one of the boss fights. Now, to understand this world completely, we have to look at the compass direction indicator on the right here. We can see that it is tilted at 45 degrees. Now, this 45-degree tilt is what they refer to as compass declination. This is the difference between true north or map north and compass north. So if we look at the grid and think of the vertical line pointing to the top as true north and the compass direction at 45 degrees as magnetic north, that makes sense. Now, this 45-degree declination is exaggerated quite a bit in the game. In real life, in that area of the world, it's really only about 8 to 12 degrees, depending on where exactly you're located. In-game, I think just because of the way that the grid is laid out, the developers had to choose to either make north to south as a vertical line or as a line tilted at 45 degrees. And as we can see, they chose to use 45 degrees for the compass declination. Now, if we superimpose a compass over one of the islands, we can see where the compass directions are in-game. Now, our brain likes things to be neat and tidy. It would prefer that the closest islands were on the 4 primary compass bearings, north to south on a vertical line and east to west on a horizontal line, but they're not. The 4 primary compass directions are actually the diagonal bearings pointing at the islands that are a bit further away. And this just messes with our mind, and it makes it harder for us to accept the layout of the world. One thing that we can see from this is that from any island, all of the closest islands around it on the horizon will be on one of the 8 main compass bearings. If you know one direction, you can then find the corresponding island on the horizon and then quickly line up the other islands on the horizon with the other compass directions because they match up perfectly. This will help us to understand where we are in relation to the other islands around us, but it will also allow us to determine compass directions in the game, even when we don't have a compass. So, on that note, is it possible to determine a direction or multiple directions if we don't have a compass? And yes, it is. I actually have 2 different techniques that we can use to find a compass direction at any given time during our game, even if we don't have a compass. Now, I don't know if anybody uses either of these techniques other than me, so I'm going to explain them here as best I can. The first technique, this is something that is not common knowledge, but if you check it out in your own game, you'll see that it's true. We all know that there are ocean currents in this game. They're annoying as hell to deal with because they're always messing with our raft. However, there is one thing that's very cool about them, and that is they're always consistent from game to game, month to month. Every game that you play in, the currents will always be the same. And they're always flowing from north to south, magnetic north to magnetic south. So you can use this to find the compass directions anytime you're on your raft. All you have to do is let your raft drift for a while and determine what direction you're drifting. It's easiest to do that close to shore, so you have some reference points, maybe between a wreck and the island, and then you can easily figure out what direction you're actually drifting. You can also use this fact to make your in-game life a little bit easier. For example, when you're out exploring early in the game and maybe you don't have an anchor on your raft yet, when you sail to a new island, pull in and beach your raft on the north side of the island, or even just on the north side of any spit of land that's sticking out into the ocean. Doing this will cause your raft to always be pushed into shore by the north to south current. It can't go anywhere else, and you won't have to worry about your raft drifting away on you. So the second technique, and again, this is something that I don't know if anyone else uses, is that you can actually navigate using the sun and the moon. Now, we've already measured the sunrise, the sunset, and the midday sun, but we'll need more data than that. So all we have to do is go in and measure the sun at every hour of the day and note the direction. If we then do the same thing with the moon at night, we'll then have a known direction for all 24 hours of the day. And from there, once you know one direction, it's easy enough to find the other directions by lining up the directions with the islands on the horizon, as we discussed earlier. So with this technique, we can now navigate even when we don't have a compass. So I'm going to put all this data together and I'm going to make it available to you later in this video so that you can use it to navigate around in your world. What about the stars? Can we navigate using the stars in Stranded Deep? And that I don't actually know. I'm going to guess and say that you probably can, because I noticed while researching for this video that the stars do actually move. So I believe that the developers have gone to the trouble to use an actual star map. They've programmed it into the game so that the stars do actually move through the sky like they do in real life. However, I came to realize that the moon is just way easier to figure out. It's this big ball of light in the sky. There's no problem seeing it. It even casts a shadow, so you can figure it out even when it's cloudy. Stars, you have to have a clear night. You have to be able to see them, and you have to be able to figure out patterns from all of these tiny little dots in the sky. I tried, but I couldn't see any constellations that I recognized. I'm just not that good at looking at the stars. If you like the stars, go for it. Maybe you'll recognize some constellations. Maybe you'll be able to figure out how to navigate using the stars. And if you can, let me know down in the comments below, because I would like to know. Okay, at this point, I want to point out a problem with the compass. This is something that you'll need to be aware of if you'll be measuring the direction of the sun or the moon yourself. For example, if you want to check my data and make sure that it's accurate, or if you want to fill in extra data points every half hour or something. When you try to measure the sun or the moon, it's often cloudy and you can't pinpoint the exact location to get a clear compass bearing. So what you can do is you can look down at the ground and measure a shadow. For example, find a shadow from a tree or from the mast on your raft, or you can even just use your own character's shadow. However, what you need to be aware of is that when you point the compass away from the horizon, either up in the sky at the moon or the sun, or down at the ground towards a shadow, the compass bearing starts to change. The direction deviates from where it measures it at the horizon. And the further away from the horizon you go, either up or down, the greater the deviation from the actual compass direction. The deviation can be up to about 20 degrees in each direction. So that means that your measurements can vary by about 40 degrees in total, depending on where on that vertical plane that you take the measurement. Just be aware of it. What I would recommend when you're making these types of measurements is to simply move the compass in a vertical line back to the horizon and then take your compass reading from there. You don't want these massive variations in your compass measurements, so always measure the direction with your compass at the same level as the horizon, as that's the only way that you can keep your measurements consistent. Okay, so we've looked at different ways of finding different compass directions when you don't have a compass. And we now can find compass directions by the position of the sun or the moon or by the ocean currents. And once you have one direction, you can find the other directions by lining up islands on the horizon. Now, if you have trouble doing this just by eyeballing the horizon, I have a little trick that you can use to help you with that. All you basically have to do once you know a direction is to take a stick, lie it on the beach, and point the stick at the direction that you know, whether that's the sun's position or the drift of the current or whatever. Point it where you think is about right, and then sight along the edge of the stick, and then line it up with an island that's on the horizon. You now have a pretty darn straight, direct line between two compass points. From there, you can add a second stick as a cross piece, and you now have 4 compass directions. And from there, you can either just eyeball the remaining 4 diagonal directions, or if you really want to, you can add additional sticks to the diagonal directions so that you have all 8 compass directions right there on the ground in front of you. And each of these compass directions should line up with an island on the horizon, except, of course, if there's a boss fight or if you're on the edge of the map where there are no islands. Now, unfortunately, even if you use these techniques, or even if you carry your compass with you everywhere you go and you use it properly, people still get lost in this game. So until the developers add an actual usable map that you can refer to while you're playing, what are some of the best practices that we can use to ensure that we don't get lost? The first thing I would recommend is that if you're sighting an island on the horizon that you're going to sail to, pull out your spyglass and get a really good look at the island and try to memorize any discerning features you can see on that island, whether it's a tall rock or trees or a shipwreck, and remember that. Even if you lose track of where you're going on the way there, you can then look at the islands on the horizon and figure out which one it was that you were actually going to. To keep track of where you came from, when you come to a new island, you can chop down a palm tree and lay it on the beach pointing back at the direction that you came from. Alternately, you can lay sticks on the ground and form an arrow pointing back at where you came from, or you could even use rocks or whatever you have available to you. An excellent idea that many people use is that they will build a shelter on every new island that they go to, and they'll place the shelter pointing back at where they came from or pointing back at their home base, whichever is easier for you to remember. Doing that is a great idea. An even better idea is to pull out your label maker and to label the shelter so that you know where you are. You can give every island a name, or you can give it a compass direction, northwest from home, for example. Or, what is probably the best method, is to create a 5x5 grid and give every island that you visit a grid reference. Now, if you're going to be traveling with a sleeping bag and will not be building a shelter, well, then just get creative. Rename something on the island, whether it's your smoker, the base of your water still, a dead fish lying in front of your fire, a dead boar, a dead shark, a rock pile where you rename the rock on top of the pile. Anything that you can think of that you can rename and consistently remember where you place it on every island would be a great idea in order to ensure that you know where you are, where you've been, and where you should go from there. Okay, these are all tricks or techniques to help you to navigate around in the game, how to find directions, and even how to find your way back home from any particular island. However, the single most important thing that you can do to ensure that you don't get lost is to always use a compass, take compass bearings, and make a note of them. And the single most important thing that you can use to keep track of everything is, of course, a map. So on that note, I have a present for you. I'm going to post it here on the screen. This is a summary of the main things that we've learned in this video. It's a single-page document. It has a 5x5 map grid with numbers and letters along the side and the top so that every time you discover a new island, you can give it its own grid reference. Your start island is indicated in the center square on the map, and if you're starting a whole new game, there's a little red X indicating where you first spawn into the game in your life raft, and that's just slightly to the east of the start island. As you explore the world, you can mark each new island on the map. At the bottom right is an indicator that shows what direction the ocean currents are flowing from magnetic north to magnetic south. Next to that, we can see a graphic that shows the deviation from the true compass bearing whenever you are measuring above or below the horizon. And finally, it has a compass graphic which also shows in which direction the sun and the moon are going to be at each hour of the day or night. It basically has everything you need. Now the times here are indicated using a 24-hour clock. If you're not familiar with that, it's pretty simple. 1 through 12 is simply 1 a.m. through 12 noon. And 13 through 24 are basically 1 p.m. through midnight. You can Google it if you need more of an explanation than that. You can pause the video and print this out, or just look in the description below and I'll leave a link to a downloadable version of the document. Okay, so this is great. We can now use this graphic as a tool to help us to navigate and to find directions any time of the day or night, even when we don't have a compass. This should make finding our way around in the game way easier. Now, I've been working on this video for a couple of weeks. I kept discovering new things and I had to refilm a number of sequences because of the new things that I found. It's been a real process trying to make sense of it all. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I think we all know that there is something wrong within the game, but we just don't know what it is. So let's take a closer look at our sun and moon graphic and I'll enlarge it on the screen. Now that we have it as a graphic on the screen, we can see that something just doesn't look right. I mean, look at where the sun is rising and setting in this game. If I replace the in-game compass directions with the true map directions based on how it would look on the globe, we can see that the sun is basically rising in the south and setting in the north. And that's just not right. So what is going on here? I think what has happened is that the developers of the game have taken some real-world measurements from an island somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, and they've plotted in the position of the sun and the moon into the game. But they have had to compensate for the in-game 45-degree compass tilt, which is really exaggerated from what it is in reality. And I believe that they have simply made a math error. To me, it looks like they have added 45 degrees to all of the real-world compass bearings when they should have deducted 45 degrees. And if I'm correct, their in-game directions are out by a full 90 degrees. And I can demonstrate this by going back to the in-game compass bearings and then removing the 45 degrees that they added, and then deducting the 45 degrees that they should have deducted. And that ends up rotating the positions of the sun and the moon by a full 90 degrees. This looks a hell of a lot more correct. Compared to true north, the sun is now rising basically in the east and setting in the west, and is due north at midday. And if we add the 45-degree in-game compass tilt back in, you can now see where the directions of the sun and the moon should be in the game. Not where they are, but where they should be. So a simple math error has the sun rotated 90 degrees further clockwise than it should be. And well, for any of us that would subconsciously be using the sun to orient ourselves, it's no wonder that we're always getting lost in Stranded Deep. Okay, so the final thing that I want to do in this video is to try and tie it all together. So what I did is I started up a new game numerous times until I had started in every month of the year. Each time I spawned into the game in my life raft. I paddled ashore and then I had my character just stand there on the beach in the sun and wait until their SPF protection ran out and they needed to cool down. I know, it sounds pretty exciting. Now, in previous versions of the game, our survival watch would display the temperature and whether the UV was high or low. However, in the recent versions of the game, we can no longer even see the temperature, and the UV is always high. It doesn't matter what month you're in. The only time it's not high is when you're in the shade or if you're underwater or in a really bad storm, and the UV is just none. What I wanted to find out is to see if I could determine where in the world we're located simply by determining how strong the sun was in each month. The pattern of which months were hottest should indicate to us at what latitude we're located. There was not a huge difference from month to month, but there was a pattern, and it showed that the hottest months were actually March and September. Those were the months where your SPF ran out quickest. Now, this sounds crazy, but it makes sense. This would place us on or very close to the equator. The sun would actually be directly overhead in both March and September, as the sun's path changes during the course of the year. And you can see this on the graphic displayed on the screen. Now, as we have looked at the position of the sun earlier, does that match up with this scenario? Well, yes and no. Though the SPF depletes at different rates throughout the year, which indicates that the sun is changing its overhead position, the actual path of the sun in the game does not change at all. The sun is always rising in the same direction. It's always setting in the same direction, and it's always directly north in the middle of the day. If we are located on or near the equator, the sun should be north of us at midday for about half of the year. And it should be south of us for about half of the year, but it's not. My best guess is that the developers have plotted in the path of the sun based on its path in one particular month, probably June, and have simply set that as the path for the entire year. And that's fine, as long as we're aware of that, no problem. And this actually matches what we found out earlier. And to demonstrate this, and to tie this all together, I'm going to place our island here on the equator, as that is where the SPF data indicates that we'd be located. We can't tell where exactly on the equator we are, but I'm just going to use the center here because it just fits for this demonstration. So if we guess that the sun is on its path in June, this will put it up here at the Tropic of Cancer. The sun will of course travel from east to west during the course of each day. And if we add a compass overlay over our island, we can see that the sunrise will be somewhere over here on the horizon along the Tropic of Cancer. This gives us a true bearing of about 65 degrees, give or take. And if I add the 45-degree compass declination to that measurement, like they've done in the game, you get 110 degrees as the sunrise direction in-game. Unfortunately though, using the in-game compass, this puts the sun way the heck down here, which is clearly wrong. However, if I start again and I take 65-degree true bearing and deduct 45 degrees like I said they should have done, you end up with a bearing of 20 degrees. On our in-game compass, that places the sun right where we would expect it to be. Okay, so that was my proof of concept using the sunrise direction. But we could actually do the same thing with any of the directions in the game for the sun and the moon. Rotate them 90 degrees counterclockwise to compensate for the math error, and they will line up and be in the positions that we expect them to be in the real world. So there you go. In this video, we've looked at the reasons why we get lost in Straded Deep. We've learned a few new tricks, and we've now got a tool that we can use to help us find our way around in the game, or at least until the developers add their own in-game map. Now, of course, all of this could change in future versions of the game as the developers are constantly tweaking and improving things as they work towards a 1.0 release of the game, supposedly by the end of the year. Maybe they'll correct the compass directions of the sun and the moon, or maybe they'll change things completely. We'll have to wait and see. Until then, we at least now understand the main navigation issues that are currently in the game, and hopefully this will help you to enjoy the game a little bit more. That's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, leave a like or a comment below. Subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more videos from me in the future. My name is Agork. We'll catch you again next time. Bye for now.